Hello class and welcome to a new analysis of Next Please by Philip Larkin. This poem examines the human habit of living for the future, always waiting for the next good thing to arrive, instead of inhabiting the present. Its main themes are false hope and expectancy, the vanishing present, and death as the only certainty. Philip Larkin published this poem in his 1955 collection, The Less Deceived. Before we really dive into this poem, let's pause on the title itself. Next, please. So, next, please is a colloquialism, a phrase drawn straight from the language of queuing. It is what we hear at counters, in waiting rooms, in shops. So from the very first words, or the title itself, Larkin frames human life as an endless queue in which we shuffle forward, waiting for the next thing. So let's now move on to the first stanza. I'll leave you a moment to pause the video in order to read it for yourself before I give you my analysis. So in this opening stanza, the speaker diagnoses a universal human flaw. We are so eager for the future that anticipation has become a habit of ours. We spend every single day telling ourselves that real life will begin once the next thing arrives. And the poem instantly kicks off with an adverb of frequency, which will be repeated in line 3. Always. So the adverb always suggests that human beings are repeatedly drawn towards the future, stuck in a pattern of expectation. So hope in this poem is not an occasional mood, but a permanent condition, the standard, normal condition in which human beings operate. Next, we notice the collective pronoun. The immediate use of we implicates the speaker and the reader equally in the habit of being described. So this creates a sense of universality. This state of mind, this persistent attitude is shared by every single person in existence. It is an attitude that we all adopt, not just a single person. So this pairing of always and we shows how generalized, how normalized this attitude has become. Then comes an intensifier. The intensifier in question is the word to, and it carries connotation of appetite and excess when binded with the word eager, with the adjective eager. Whilst eagerness by itself might be innocent, the intensifier to turns it into something greedy and unbalanced. Our hope is excessive, unrealistic, unattainable. Now let's take a look at the diction. The phrase bad habits transforms hope from an emotion into a repetitive behavior, something mechanical rather than spontaneous. Hope, which we normally class as a virtue, is here presented as an addiction and not just an aspiration. Finally, let's consider the adverb of time, every day. And so this is again in the same vein of the we and of the always. It suggests that the expectancy is mechanical, inevitable, repeated, and systemic behavior. And let's now move on to stanza 2. I'll leave you a moment, as always, to read the stanza and form your own opinion before I begin the analysis. And so this stanza really introduces the central extended metaphor of the poem. It introduces our hopes, which are imagined as a glittering fleet of ships watched from the shore. Well, as I said, the first device we will focus on is the extended metaphor. Here, through the words sparkling armada of promises, Human hopes and expectations are imagined as a fleet of ships approaching the shore where we stand watching. The word armada carries connotations of grandeur, spectacle, and even military power. Our expectations, therefore, are not modest wishes, but a whole magnificent fleet. This effect is reinforced by the diction. Sparkling lends the fleet a seductive brilliance, whilst tiny and clear keep it small and distant. This very precise language is highly interesting. The ships can be seen exactly, but not reached. The promises of the future are vivid, detailed, and dazzling, yet they are permanently out of grasp. So with these few words, Larkin really summarizes the whole psychology behind expectations. Our expectations and hopes are so grand, so scintillating, but in reality, they are unattainable. The stanza then shifts register through exclamatory syntax. How slow they are, and how much time they waste refusing to make haste. The exclamatory syntax signals frustration bursting through the poem's measured surface. Furthermore, the repeated how intensifiers in these two exclamatory sentences really reinforce the speaker's complaint. The tone becomes almost petulant, like a child complaining about a late birthday. Let's now move on into stanza 3. Please pause the video and read it for yourself in order to form your own opinion. So this stanza delivers the first great deflation. Despite the perfect and gleaming approach of each promise, what we are actually left holding is disappointment. And so yet, here the conjunction yet acts as a volta. The conjunction functions as a turn, a shift in direction that introduces this disappointment to contrast with the huge and dazzling hopes. Everything the previous stanza built, the sparkle, the spectacle, the nearness is overturned by a single word. Next, let's briefly dwell over the imagery in wretched stalks of disappointment. The image of holding wretched stalks is one of the most striking in the poem. A stalk is what remains when a flower has gone. Whilst we hoped for beautiful, lush flowers, in reality, all that we received are the stems. These wretched stalks therefore symbolize our disappointment. And this disappointment is made tangible as we are physically holding it. It is grasped in the hand. And that concreteness matters. The letdown is not an abstract mood, but an object we are left holding, evidence of what was promised and never delivered. Let's then consider the lexical set of excessive decoration. Here, the excessive decorative detail of the ships is exposed in the brasswork prinked and each rope distinct. This cluster of ornate maritime vocabulary sustains the extended metaphor. This lexical set shows how flawless and polished each promise appears. Finally, we have a negative indefinite pronoun in nothing balks. Larkin writes that nothing balks each big approach. Nothing stops the ships from coming nearer. Their approach seems unobstructed and unstoppable. We can now safely move on to stanza 4. As always, please pause the video in order to form your own opinion. In the stanza, the ship of hope comes closest of all, but then it simply passes by and never stops, and the longed-for moment converts instantly into the past. So the lexical set from the previous stanza here continues, which with excessive decorative detail of the ships. Each detail is more pristine and magnificent as the previous one. The abundance and extravagance reaches its climax here with the flags and the gilded figurehead, completing the inventory of ornament. And this leads us to the stanza's symbolism. The ship arches our way but never anchors. And this really carries Larkin's central message about hope. Every ship of hope draws right up to the shore of the present, seems on the very brink of arriving, and then glides past without ever docking. Arrival is permanently deferred. Next, we have an antithesis. The opposition of present and past within a single clause captures the impossibility of grasping the moment. The moment anything arrives, it has already begun to leave. Finally, notice the truncated final line, which is a mainstay in this poem as it appears in every single stanza. The last line seems cut short, just as the stanza's hope is cut short. Its brevity mirrors the abruptness of loss. And let's now move on to the penultimate stanza. As always, please pause the video and form your own opinion on this stanza. Here, the speaker exposes the secret belief underneath all this waiting. We are convinced that one of these ships will finally dock and pay out everything we think our patience has earned. The stanza begins with a striking modal verb in will. Here the modal expresses certainty rather than mere hope. We do not merely wish for fulfillment, we are convinced it must come. Next we have symbolism with the cargo, which is described. The unloading of the ship represents the delivery of promised happiness, satisfaction, or reward. Now let's analyze the diction, which works on two levels. First, ode frames hope as a transaction. Patient waiting is imagined as moral credit that the universe must eventually repay. And the word ode really reinforces the entitlement of these people who think that just by patiently waiting, they will be rewarded. Devoutly then introduces almost religious language, as if the waiting were an act of worship. Then we have the diction all good. This diction reduces everything people hope for into one vague and childlike idea of complete happiness or total reward. It perhaps hints at the naivety of these people. Alongside this, we have intensifiers. So devoutly and so long emphasize how deeply and persistently people invest in expectation. The effect is to make the expectation almost like an act of faith. And so all this piles together to create a profound tone of irony. We know how much Larkin appreciates irony in his poems, and this is one of the most emphatic uses of irony by Larkin. Larkin is very clearly satirizing hope here. He makes the hopeful people seem overly earnest and even naive because they keep believing the next arrival will finally deliver all good, everything as a reward for their tedious wait. And the description of waiting as devout and tedious and long is in itself ironic. Waiting itself is an effortless act, and the fact that people expect so much from it is highly naive. So Larkin pokes fun at these people very clearly. He also pokes fun at how immense their expectations are in comparison with their quite limited commitment and devotion. Waiting, as I said, itself should not justify or warrant any sort of reward. And Larkin puts an end to this irony abruptly with the word but, the conjunction but. The conjunction closes all the preceding hope in a single word. Everything before it is illusion, and everything after it is the truth. And the poem now steps through into its final stanza. As always, please pause the video and read the stanza for yourself. Well, first of all, the stanza starts with a contrast in the word only. There is a stark opposition between the singular and final certainty of only and the plural, abundant illusion of the earlier promises. Whilst the ships of hope had been so plentiful, in reality only one singular boat effectively anchors and passes through the dock. The poem previously suggested many possible and plentiful futures, with the sparkling armada implying a whole fleet of boats and hopes. But now the plural collapses into one. Of all the ships we watch for, exactly one is real. And it is the one nobody is hoping for. So this one ship is presented through a symbolism. The single ship with black sails is obviously a symbol of death, and it may also recall the classical and mythological story of Theseus, where black sails signaled death to those watching from the shore. Then the verb seeking acts as a zoomorphism. Seeking makes the ship seem like a predator, a predatory animal actively hunting the speaker rather than simply approaching. This reverses the power dynamic of the entire poem. For 5 stanzas, we pursued the ships with our eyes. But now, in the final stanza, a ship pursues us. Then comes the unusual grammar. Here, the adjective unfamiliar is used as a noun. Death is so unlike anything in experience that ordinary grammar cannot name it. It can only be called the unfamiliar. The strangeness of the syntax embodies the strangeness of what is being described. Now let's consider the objectification of silence, which is being towed, carried by the boat. Silence is made into a physical and tangible object. It is huge, it is birdless, and it is towed. Now comes the caesura. It is the heaviest pause in the poem as it falls in the middle of a line. The caesura itself feels like the silence that it describes, the silence being towed by the ship. So we once again have this effect where Larkin wants to recreate the content of the poem through the form. Finally, the poem ends with negation. No waters breed or break. The poem ends, therefore, on a negation. Nothing generates, nothing falls after the death. In the wake of this ship, symbolizing death, no waters breed or break. Even the sea, the most fertile of all symbols, is sterile behind the ship. Let's now move on to an analysis of structure, form, and rhythm. First of all, in terms of structure, the poem is built on one extended metaphor that develops in a single continuous movement. So the extended metaphor in question is obviously that of first of all, the fleet, and then the single lone ship. And then a clear volta arrives at the end of stanza 5 with a conjunction but. After the 5 stanzas of illusion, 1 stanza of truth. In terms of form, we have 6 quatrains of regular appearance, giving the poem a neat and controlled shape that contrasts with its bleak message. Each stanza has 3 long lines followed by 1 sharply truncated final line. So visually, this recreates the theme. Every stanza, like every promise, comes up short. The rhyming couplets, which are AABB, give each stanza a sense of order and inevitability, as if the disappointment were as predictable as the rhyme. Finally, in terms of rhythm, it is broadly a iambic pentameter, though through the truncation of the 4th line in every stanza, this pentameter is broken. So to conclude, the poem can really be summed up through 3 main themes. The first theme is false hope and expectancy. From the moral diction of the opening lines to the glittering armada, hope is presented as a bad habit and a seductive illusion. The promises look magnificent only from a distance, sparkling, tiny, and clear. And what they finally delivered are the wretchedest stalks of disappointment. The second theme is time and the vanishing present. The poem's central paradox is that the present barely exists. Each promise converts instantly from future expectation to past. So from future to past, without ever anchoring, without us being able to enjoy it in the present moment. The third and final theme is death as the only certainty. The final stanza replaces the many bright ships with one black-sailed vessel that is genuinely seeking us. Its wake is sterile and silent, which makes death the single promise that keeps its appointment. And on that note, thank you so much for having watched my entire analysis all the way through. Please like the video and subscribe and comment. And I'll see you in the next video.